All right. Let's take a look at the strategy and the decorator pattern. We've already discussed the pros and cons of comparing how if you would use perhaps inheritance versus composition. Right. I mean, definitely inheritance is one of the defining features of object-oriented analysis and design, and certainly it's a great tool and great feature to have in a language. But then we contrast it with alternative ways of achieving the same thing of using composition, as opposed to using the is-a relationship between two classes. One of the classes could instead have a has-a relationship as opposed to an is-a relationship, right? Where one of the classes just has an instance of the other class and just forwards any methods. It reuses any of the methods that are implemented in the other class as opposed to inheriting them. Yeah. So today we'll look at two other strategies that also make use of this idea of composition of delegates, right, as opposed to inheritance. And so we'll look at how much better it would be using these two strategies as opposed to inheritance. Right? The main problem with inheritance is that it's static, right? The relationship that you establish between any two classes is hard-coded in your source code, right? You say that this inherits from that. There's no dynamic inheritance. You can't at runtime you cannot decide to inherit from someone else. Yes. So it's less dynamic, right? Than perhaps having references to different classes, and the different classes could be of different types, right? As long as they belong to the same interface, the implementations might be different, right? And you can choose at runtime which one you want to use, right? As opposed to in inheritance is fairly straight. It's hard-coded in the syntax when you establish the relationship at compile time, right? As opposed to being able to establish it dynamically at runtime. Yes. So let's look at using these two strategies, right? And see what can we accomplish. So these two strategies, the decorator strategy and the strategy, these two design patterns, the strategy design pattern and the decorator design pattern, they're very similar. They both deal with using delegation, right? Meaning an instance of some other delegate class, right? They both use that same technique. They both focus on achieving one particular task very well, right? And only that task, and then being able to combine many of these strategies, many of these decorators, right, to achieve ever increasing more complex behaviors, right? So they're all ways that you can combine small little pieces that add an incremental feature set, right? And the beauty of these two mechanisms is that they can be dynamic, right? You can build them up at runtime, decide which strategy or which decorator to use at runtime, as opposed to establishing it at compile time. Okay. They're slightly different in that strategy. We'll see that perhaps one strategy might be able to be implemented all by itself and not rely on any sub-strategy, as opposed to we'll see that decorators basically reuse use delegates to always delegate their work to ever more smaller pieces of other functionality. So we'll look at a strategy slightly easier to capture and understand. It's a little more intuitive. So we'll take a look at that first, and then we'll revisit decorator and see that it's pretty much the same idea. It's just that slightly different purpose as well. So let's talk about the strategy design pattern.